Guys, we are back here on the Screen Team as we have a theme show of James Bond films, and we're here with our James Bond expert, Jake Whitlow. And Jake has chosen this next one, and this one is called From Russia with Love, starring Sean Connery. Is this your favorite Sean Connery Bond film?
No, but it's up there.
Yeah?
It's hard for me to pick a favorite of Sean's. Like the first 4 Bond movies where Sean Connery's in, that they're kind of equal to me.
Sure.
But this is one of my favorites, and I think it's because it just has the most unique flow of the early Bond movies. It just, like, Dr. No was a lot of action.
Mm-hmm.
This one's a lot of kind of, you'll have a little bit of action and then a lot of kind of dialogue and explaining things. And it's kind of a deeper Bond. And the book is the same way. The book is actually told in 2 halves. The first half is completely from the enemy's point of view. The second half, and the second half is from James Bond's point of view.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
So, but this movie, it doesn't quite play. It kind of starts that way because your first big chunk of the movie is all the enemy's plan and what they want to do, and then once you intro James Bond, it becomes after, of course, the musical sequence, the musical credit sequence, it becomes James Bond's story after that. And it kind of is a continuation of some of the little plot points they made in Dr. No. They make mention of Dr. No. At the very beginning has the same kind of fling that he had in the beginning of Dr. No, the same Bond girl, if you would. And it kind of leads into it. And I think it's one of the more unique Bond movies. It kind of has its own tropes, and it kind of set the stage for what Bond was going to be in every other movie, because this was only the second full-length production.
Okay. What I thought was cool about this film, and Jake, you had mentioned it here just recently, is that the connections. I mean, I love James Bond, but I'm not the biggest James Bond fan. I've seen maybe a dozen of the films, and I've always thought they were kind of standalone movies, if you will, except for the newer ones that we know about. But I was surprised by all the connections to Dr. No, all the connections with the group who was supposedly the bad guys in this film, Spectre, which if you've seen the newest James Bond film, there's, connections there. And Spectre apparently is a huge villain organization in the James Bond universe, right?
Yes, in the novels and in the lore.
Yeah.
The kind of one of the masterminds that's pulling a lot of the strings that you might not even be mentioned in one of the stories, but they're usually somewhere tied into that. And they'll draw into that where different stories from different stories, either movies or books, will kind of tie into each other.
Yeah. Usually in these James Bond films, James Bond has some sort of ally, whether it's who's the American? He always
Felix Leiter.
Felix isn't in this one.
No, Felix isn't in this one. Felix Leiter is a CIA agent that he meets in Dr. No. I'm not sure if that's how it works chronologically in the book universe, but in the movie, that's where they first meet.
But in this one, he has an ally. Is the guy like a hotel owner, or what does the guy do?
He's head of Station H, and I'm trying to remember the character's name.
Yeah.
Because as many times as I've seen this movie, I always forget. Karim Bey, that's his name. That's the character's name, Karim Bey.
He's a cool guy, and he shows James Bond around, helps him, with his detective work and stuff like that, throughout the movie. But I thought he was a very cool character, and one of our big baddies in this character is a huge, muscular blonde dude played by the guy from Jaws.
Yeah, exactly. Red, I think, is his character name.
Even though he's blonde.
But he's just called Red. But yeah, he's and there's a whole lot about him in the book that's not in the movie. But I think the movie does a really good job because he doesn't have a spoken role until his last moments in the movie.
And that's when I was watching the whole movie. I didn't recognize him until he started talking because he's got such a recognizable voice that you've seen him in movies like The Sting. His name escapes me now, but you've seen him in The Sting. You've seen him in Jaws, and he's just a very Robert Shaw is his name.
Yes.
Robert Shaw is his name. Talented guy, and I thought he was a pretty decent villain. I wouldn't say he's one of the best, but I thought he was all right.
Ominous throughout the film because a lot of the times you don't see what he did. You don't see what he's doing as he's doing it.
Sure.
You see what he's done. Early in the film, there's a point where you see that he is in. They kind of talk about the KGB and different organizations in Istanbul where most of the movie takes place. They follow each other. Karim Bey, who is a division of MI6, who British Secret Service, who is stationed in Istanbul, says, you know, they follow each other around just to keep tabs on each other, and if, you know, they're not doing it, they know something's up.
Yeah.
But you see a point where you see the KGB guy laid down in the car seat, dead, and choked out, and Robert Shaw driving, and he, you know, he doesn't speak throughout the movie up until like his last scene almost. Yeah. And pretty much his last scene. That's the only time he really speaks. So he's just a very ominous baddie for the movie. You know, in this movie, you see a lot of the references that you see in the Austin Powers films. You know, the guy who rubs his cat, and the redhead who's, you know, ominous and, you know, hard as nails, you know, kind of character. Exactly. And I'm trying to think of that character's name. I would typically remember that because she's a little more of a bigger character, once again, in the book universe, the novel universe. And what's the name of the guy with the cat? What's his name? Blofeld. Blofeld. And he's been played by a lot of different actors, right? Yes, and he was, you know, essentially known as #1 Inspector. He is the kind of the head of operations. He's the final say. Gotcha. So you'll see that cat in a lot of the early films. I think this is the first appearance. It's not the first mention of Spectre. They did actually mention Spectre in Dr. No shortly. Dr. No, kind of, that's where you're introduced into the film universe. But man, it's a great movie. It can be a bit of a slow burn. But I remember the first time I watched it, it went really fast. But the more you watch it, the more stuff you kind of notice as you're watching the movie, and the more it's got a lot more subtle action. It's much more of an espionage film. True. Less of an action film. True. I'm curious, before we go, do you have to watch Dr. No first to enjoy this one? No, I don't think so. I mean, there'll be some references that you might miss out on, but it's not enough to not know what the story's going on. And that's what's great about the James Bond films, is you can hop in at any point and enjoy the movie as a standalone movie. True. But they do, for the fans, do a lot of referencing and a lot of fan service throughout the history of the series. So what you're saying is James Bond was, you know, doing this canon thing before Star Wars and before Avengers, right? Exactly. And that's because a lot of these scripts were written, or screenplays were written off of the books, off the novels. Cool. So there's mention of in some of the newer movies, I mean, even up to one we're going to talk about in a little while, The Living Daylights, about when James Bond got married, which was what was that, Under Her Majesty's Secret Service. He actually gets married at the end of that movie. Yeah. And a couple of the movies after that, some of the Roger Moore movies and one of the Timothy Dalton movies actually mention that. And a lot of people will be like, well, James Bond was married? What? You know? You have to see them all to catch all the references. And I've seen them all way too many times. That's why we have him on the show. He's our the bad ones. He's our James Bond expert. He's Jake. He has more James Bond coming your way right here on the Screen Team.